Hello everyone, welcome back. Our next speaker is Joshua Greene. Joshua Greene is a retired adjunct professor of religious studies at Hofstra University and is a popular lecturer on yoga philosophy. Since 2006, he has served as resident bhakti instructor at Jivamukti Yoga in New York City, where he leads a weekly discussion group on the Bhagavad-Gita, Isa Upanishad, Bhakti Sutras, and other yoga texts. He has taught at dozens of yoga schools around the country. His books include Swami in a Strange Land, How Krishna Came to the West, a biography of his late teacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the bestseller Here Comes the Sun, The Spiritual and Musical Journey of George Harrison, and Gita Wisdom, an introduction to India's essential yoga text. He is a filmmaker whose work includes several documentaries on the Holocaust for PBS and Discovery, as well as Living Yoga, a biography of Swami SΑDHANA, founder of Integral Yoga. In 1970, he received his Bhakti Shastri ministerial degree and the initiated name Yogeshwara Das. In 1982, after 13 years in ashrams of India and Europe, he returned to New York where he served as director of programming for Cablevision and as senior vice president, global affairs at Reuter Finn, a worldwide public relations firm. So with that, please welcome Joshua Greene and his talk, The Hero's Journey, the Bhagavad-Gita as Monomyth.
Okay. Hello, my name is Joshua Greene. Sometimes people call me by my initiated name, Yogeshwara. You're welcome to use whatever is comfortable for you. I'm very pleased to talk with you today about my favorite subject, which is the Bhagavad-Gita. Bhagavad-Gita is a great adventure. It's a discovery of something that we're missing. It's the adventure that's been described by texts, old and new. It's the adventure that's been pointed to by recent discoveries in physics and cosmology. And it is an adventure that takes place in a different kind of reality from our ordinary, everyday reality. Something that's just below the surface of things, but which is invisible until we acquire the tools for seeing it. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the tools that the Bhagavad Gita provides for seeing that mystery of life lying just below the surface. So let's start by defining certain terms. The name of this session is Bhagavad Gita as Monomyth, the hero journey. So let's first describe what is Bhagavad Gita, and then we'll talk about what is a monomyth. All right. The Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses in the larger epic Sanskrit text Mahabharata. Now there are 100,000 verses in the Mahabharata. It's the longest epic in existence. It's longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And these 18 chapters, these 700 verses, take place just before the start of an epic battle called the Battle of Kurukshetra. Tradition says that the origins of this epic story, Mahabharata, in which we find the Bhagavad Gita, go back before recorded history. In other words, it took place on this planet at a particular time, but it's taken place elsewhere on other planets in other ages. So it's an eternal story. Here you see in this picture some manuscripts, some palm leaf manuscripts dating back 500 years or so. There aren't that many. There's no Dead Sea Scrolls version of the Mahabharata, for example. The texts in India were written on these very fragile palm leaf or banana leaf templates that would dissolve quickly in weather or with humidity. So most of the tradition has been handed down orally. The ancient wisdom of India is an oral tradition. And what we're going to hear about is how that tradition has come down to us today. About 5,000 years ago, according to the internal description of the Vedic texts, sage Vyasa foretold that the age to come, the age that you and I know, Kali Yuga, would be a time when people had very little memory. So he compiled the Mahabharata which is basically a war story, and he put the Bhagavad-Gita right in the middle, right at that point of the beginning of the battle, so that people reading this exciting story would get the very essence of Indian spirituality along with that great narrative. The Kurukshetra field, the battlefield, is an actual place. You can get to it by taking a train from New Delhi. You can actually go and see where this epic story took place. And what is that story? Well, the story is briefly that there is this hero named Arjuna. He is the protagonist in the story of the Bhagavad Gita. And he's a wise, sensitive, caring man who happens to also be a soldier. So he's a member of the military. And things had come to a point where he was forced to do the one thing he never wanted to do. And that was fight in an epic battle where he knew thousands upon thousands of people would be killed. And he's traumatized by the prospect of having to be the catalyst for this battle. Now, it didn't even matter to him at that point that it was a righteous battle, meaning that the bad guys in this epic struggle, the Kauravas as they were known, were, today we might call them terrorists. They were murderers. They had usurped the kingdom. They would stop at nothing for their own selfish ends. They had to be stopped. So in that sense, it was, if you will, authorized. In the Vedic culture, the ancient wisdom culture of India, there were different divisions of the culture. You had the warrior caste, of which Arjuna is a part. Then you had the Brahmin caste, the priests, the spiritual leaders, the religious leaders, whose job it was to see that if the Kshatriyas, if the administrators, the warriors, the politicians are going to engage in battle, that it was justified, that it was, if you will, a righteous battle. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm 66 next month. I'm an old hippie. The idea that there's a righteous way to fight was a bit of a hard stretch for me. Getting my arms around that one took a long time. But if you think about it, in the history of the world, there's never been a moment free from conflict. And the first responsibility of government is to make sure that citizens like you and me are protected and comfortable so that we can go about our yoga class undistracted. People have the right to engage in a productive life without being worried, without worrying about threats from the outside. So it's a complicated issue, but Arjuna, being of a Brahminical nature, was confronting this existential dilemma that he knew it was a righteous battle, but still he did not wish to engage in it. He didn't want to be a soldier anymore. He wanted to quit the battlefield and go practice yoga in the woods. He wanted to open up a studio. And his guide, Krishna, who is described in the Gita as the supreme, speaking in personal form, essentially says to him, this is your yoga studio, this battlefield. This is where you will come to make the greatest spiritual progress. Not in some life that you don't have someplace else, but in the life you have. Don't run away from that. Go deeper inside it, and you will find the very tools for the fulfillment and contentment that you think you will get by running away. So that's the first lesson of the Bhagavad Gita. Everything you need for your spiritual life has been provided to us. We don't need to go very far away. We're not lacking something. In fact, the entire message of Bhagavad Gita is that you are what you seek. What you need for fulfillment in life, you already have. Spiritual progress is not something you get, like some kind of a prize. If you do enough yoga, you get this gold ring. It's an awakening of something that's already there within each of us. So here we see a few samples, a few different covers from different Bhagavad Gitas. There are hundreds and hundreds of Bhagavad Gitas. Professor Richard Davis has identified about 300, I believe, in English alone. And that's not counting other versions of the Bhagavad Gita and in different languages and for different purposes. Each edition of the Gita has a particular angle. Some are environmentally grounded, others are, there's a Bhagavad Gita for business people. You know, the 7 effective principles of yogis in the boardroom. You can interpret the Bhagavad Gita in any number of ways. There's even this anti-Semitic Bhagavad Gita, which dates back to the 19th century, by a French commentator who emphasized the notion of the Aryan people. The word Arya actually appears in Bhagavad Gita. It was appropriated or misappropriated by the Nazis in the 1930s to mean a superior race of beings. The word Aryan in Sanskrit simply means one who has a sense of life's higher purpose. It is not biological or chemical. Here you have an example of the cover of an impersonalist Gita. What is an impersonalist Gita? Impersonalist Gita means a Gita that takes Krishna's teachings but moves Krishna over to the side. You'll see, for example, that the very cover of the book kind of gives away the shop. It's not Krishna and Arjuna speaking. It's a bright, impersonal, amorphous light. And an impersonalist Gita would be a Gita that says, ultimately, we all become Krishna. Whereas the message of the Gita is quite different. The message of the Gita is that we remain what we are, eternal souls, and by perfection of yoga, we come to a place where our heart softens and we reawaken a love for the Supreme Person that's there at the heart of all beings. So we can get into that a little bit later. So, the Gita is the world's, you might say, oldest book of wisdom, book of secrets, self-help book. It's very short, it's very portable, it has a lot of good features in that way. This, remember, was about 2,000 years before Patanjali codified the Yoga Sutras. So it is also the world's oldest yoga text. Why do people move Krishna to the side then, if his role is so important? I think in large measure it's because people mistake bhakti, or the devotional yoga that Krishna is emphasizing, as religion. It's not. The Bhagavad Gita is not a religious text. It's a highly theistic text, but it is not a religion. The Bhagavad Gita does not talk about changing your faith or converting from one kind of religion to another kind of religion. It's not Hinduism. The word Hindu does not appear anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita or in any of the Sanskrit texts. What does the Gita talk about? It talks about consciousness. Here's a verse from the 2nd chapter. Just as the embodied soul passes from childhood to youth and from youth to old age, the soul passes into another body at death. This is the sum and substance of the Gita, that we are not the physical body or the subtle mind. We're something more fundamental. Consciousness is real. Nobody has to tell you you're alive. You know that. You feel it. It's palpable. What is that life? What is the thing that exists once we've stripped away all of the other traumas and identifications and name tags that we've acquired over the many, many years of our lifetime? That core self that existed before this body came into being, and which will continue to endure after the death of the body, that eternal self, or Atma, consciousness, that is the central subject of the Bhagavad Gita.